Hello, Ian. Good evening. Welcome, everybody, to the Tinfoil Tribe. My phone's just notified me I'm live, so I must be. How are you?
Good. How about yourself?
Not too bad. Tonight, we're going to have a catch up with John Wedger. Not spoke to him since silly season, lockdown 2020. So he's just making a cup of tea now. He actually does a thing on the internet called Brew with a View, where he has a brew on a London building. And yeah. Well, what's going on with you? Has anything caught your eye in the news in the clown world this week?
Not much. I mean, I did see something interesting on Facebook that said, and I don't know if this is true. It could just be Facebook crap. But since they started the war with Iran, Epstein such as a 95% down. So it's working anyway. The distraction.
Somebody mentioned there was a recording of Trump on about the tapes, and do you think the war is a distraction on Epstein mania?
It certainly seems to have been hurried along. I mean, I don't remember anybody really being amped up about Iran up until a few weeks ago. So it could be to do with. Normally, it's to do with Federal Reserve things, isn't it? Over there, it's either oil, Federal Reserves. It could even be ancient technology. I bet if you asked, like Guy Anderson, who was on the other week, he probably would think there's something to do with Stargates or hidden ancient.
Yeah, there's meant to be a Stargate over there, isn't there?
Yeah, and
ancient Sumerian technology kind of thing. It's all very fascinating, to be honest with you. But we're definitely getting biblical worldwide, aren't we? With everything that's going on.
Certainly seems it.
But the thing is, not to. I just don't let it worry me. The world's burning around your ear and around us, so just warm your hands on the flames. I think
that's about all you can do. Yeah.
Hopefully, Mr. Wedger will have some pearls of wisdom for us when he's making his brew. I don't know what his choice of brew is, PG tip. So yeah, I don't know really. But Marcus says thank you very. We didn't say thank you. What am I saying? Marcus, good evening. One viewer, one loyal viewer. Marcus is in. We've got 5 people watching the show. And yeah, we're just waiting. But this is kind of like Ricky Gervais at Live Aid when he was holding the show together, and waiting for someone to come on or other.
Yeah, I didn't see that.
Yeah, it was quite cringeworthy. He I forget who it was, but there was a delay in the crossover between acts, and they stuck him on stage, and he just went to pieces because he's not a natural stand-up. He learned it later on, but we're not. That's a completely different issue. With this that's not a tinfoil subject, really, kind of thing. So yeah, we're just waiting for John.
So you've talked to John before, and why don't you tell us a bit about his background from what you know, so that people know what they're getting into.
Well, he was a Met detective in London, turned whistleblower.
Right.
He was, from what I recall, exposing too many paedophiles. They told him to expose paedophiles, and he did rather more than his quota. And he was told, John, if you're watching this you're not yet, and he was told, like, just simmer down a bit, and he didn't, and he was threatened with his livelihood, with his family. He had all these threats leveled at him, allegedly, and he also looked into the realms of elite Satanism and child abduction, ritualistic sacrifice, sex trafficking, and he was also looking into London gangs, which is a very interesting one, using voodoo to attain power. There were certain gangs in London, which hopefully he'll be able to tell us about. Not just voodoo. Is it called Santeria?
It's like a Latin version, isn't it?
There's another form of magic, but these gangs in London were using basic magic to ascend or kind of control the little realms, kind of thing. and he's also looking into the grooming gangs now. And I think he's actually working for he's going to get some work for the BBC. I don't know how big this cup of tea is, John, but that's a potted Wigan history of John Wedger.
Right. Okay. Well, it seems like this will be quite a timely chat then, because I mean, obviously, everything with the Epstein files now, it's got people interested, I think, on a mainstream level, but they're also trying to backtrack that now, aren't they? They're trying to, everything's redacted anyway already, but the fact of the matter is that people were a little too interested, and now they've got to start backpedaling it a bit.
Do you think people have become desensitized to the Epstein files?
I don't know if anybody's desensitized to the idea of kids being tortured, but I think it's probably more a sense of feeling powerless. I mean, we're being shown what these people have done. We're being shown, some admittance of guilt, and basically nobody's been. I mean, there's been Peter Mandelson that was arrested, but I mean, how high is he up on the chain? I've no idea, but it seems like that's showing us almost like we do whatever we want and we're going to continue doing it. That's how it feels, I think, probably to most people.
And Andrew Mountbatten, the artist formerly known as Prince, is still swanning about, isn't he?
Well, I mean, if you think about it, most of these people, they get a slap on the wrist, don't they? They get a title removed, or they have to resign the job. If it was a normal person tied to any of this, it'd be criminal action straight away. So, it doesn't matter that a CEO resigned his job and got a $20 million payoff or something like that. That's not a punishment, is it? For most people, that's most people's dream come true. So
it's very bizarre. I mean, have you heard the story of Leonardo DiCaprio? He's meant to have eaten loads of human flesh.
I did hear that. He was 70 pounds or something like that.
And everybody's kicking off on it. He's had to come off social media because people are fucking calling him a cannibal and all that. It's just nuts, isn't it?
People are saying the same about Ellen, aren't they?
Oh well, she is. I've always thought she's a wrong one. To be fair, she looks like a nasty piece of work. There was all that talk of during lockdown. They were meant to be wearing tags, weren't they? Like they were under house arrest.
Yeah, that's what it looked like.
Let's have a see who's in. Who's Joe? We've got 8 people watching. This basically we're melting the internet tonight, Ian. We've got Martin Hards, the artist formerly known as Redding. Good evening, Martin. Good evening, Tracy. Dorian Grazing, looking a picture of health. A bit of a play on a player that. Oh, I'll shut the fuck up. I don't know where John is. I hope he's not fell over near the kettle or something. But yeah, the world's never been as crazier as it is right now. I don't think in my life.
I think the crazy thing is we're seeing the strings now, and I don't know when it's going to be when people are going to say, well, we can't keep operating under these people or creatures or whatever you want to call them. When is it time to stop paying taxes? When is it time to, change things?
So, Ian, John has entered the building.
Right.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. John Wedger. Good evening, John.
Hi, Jimmy. How are you?
I'm all right. This is Ian, my co-pilot.
Nice to meet you, John.
It's
good.
Great.
How you doing?
Thank you so much for joining us. Last time I spoke to you, you came to Wigan and it was silly season. It was all that crazy lockdown stuff. So what's been going on? A potted brief. What's been going on for you since then?
Well. My narrative remains the same. Although I was sort of pretty much the underdog back then, and although I had a lot of the survivor community and a few of the activists sort of behind me, the national media weren't, and now they sort of are. It's almost like my script was predictive. So I've done quite a bit of national TV, big podcasts. I've sort of done. So I mean, the last 2 years gone crazy, and especially now with the Epstein files coming out, it's pretty much what I've been saying from the start. Anyway, I mean, we look at this, Jimmy. The Epstein stuff. We had all this with Dr. Joan Coleman's RAINS list, which is the Ritual Abuse Information Network Support. The Epstein file sort of holds short of really, it names people with the inference of things that have gone on. But the RAINS list actually says it. The RAINS list mentioned Peter Mandelson, that he was involved in the murder of a rent boy, calls him out as a Satanist. It's on there. It's a document that's there. I'm just sort of repeating what is written down. So we didn't need the Epstein files to tell us that. Dr. Joan Coleman told us many years ago what these people are alleged to be involved in, and it wasn't just one voice; it was a corroborated effort. We've had Dolphin Square, we've had the Elm Guest House list, so we've had, the great and the good, supposedly, the privileged and the powerful, mentioned in respect to their proclivity for sex and ill treatment of very vulnerable young children.
Yeah. Last time we spoke, you was horning in on the satanic elite and the sacrifice angle. Did you have to pivot, or did you get too much heat for doing that, or are you still pursuing that kind of narrative?
Yeah, I mean, the thing with satanic ritual abuse is that you've got to get your ducks in a row with that one. The attack you get is just off the Richter scale. You can talk about abuse, you can talk about corruption, paedophilia. There's no real drama. But the moment you speak about ritual abuse, you get this concerted effort to silence you. There's one sort of national publication in particular, whose editor is quite a well-known celebrity. They really go out of their way. There's a journalist, a doctor of journalism, who actually teaches at the main school in the City of London for journalism. A woman called Rosie Waterhouse, and she has a presentation about satanic panic, going out of her way to debunk the reality that is Satanism. And it's like a 90-minute presentation, and a third of it is dedicated to attacking me. So someone of her sort of position in the journalistic world, I think she was an editor of The Guardian for a while. I don't like the woman. I've got no time for the woman. In fact, I pray for the woman because she's picked sides, and she's picked the side of a loser and a liar, which is what Satanism is. But, they just don't like it, and they've got backing behind them. They're very, very well connected, very, very well organised, but, they're deluded. They can think, my only conclusion is that these are broken people, these are immature, emotionally immature, emotionally retarded individuals that are full of hate and spite and are out for some sort of comfort, and they go to the lie that is Satanism to accomplish that. I have been contacted by past Satanists and active Satanists, and they've explained how they ended up in that world. And it's usually a journey of pain and a journey that in which that they want some sort of justice, and they don't think that our judicial system, our penal system, gives that. So they try and get some sort of spiritual justice, and that is through Satanism, because there's a revenge element to it. And most of them say that I'm what's termed a born again Christian. I believe that Jesus Christ is my Lord and my Savior, and that was decision was taken because I actually witnessed and lived a miracle. So nothing can ever devoid me of that. But there's a lot of people that were abused as children, and in their words, they called out to Jesus and he wasn't there. That's their opinion. That's their view. I understand that standpoint. I do not agree with it, but I understand it. And that's what happened. And also what we've got to look at is in respect to satanic ritual abuse, ecclesiastical venues are used as a setting for these rituals. There's many of the very old, especially the Norman churches, that they were just built on the sites of old pagan altars and things like that. So it's just paganism revisited. There are priests that are involved in these rituals, and in fact, in recent years. We've seen it with the expose on people like Bishop Peter Ball, for the sexual and physical abuse that he dished out to vulnerable young men, and some of them went on to kill themselves. And then more recently, Bishop John Smythe, who was many years protected by the Anglican Church. Justin Welby went out of his way to protect this guy. And again, he was the same. He was a homosexual paedophile, and a very sadistic one at that, and achieved the rank of bishop. And John Smythe was an interesting individual because he advocated for the Protestant Church. He was now termed a QC at Queen's Counsel, and he was the fastest ever promoted barrister to that rank. A highly intelligent, very charismatic man, but emotionally, he's a broken, perverted, sadistic individual. So, and there isn't like these. It's not as if these people aren't without an audit trail. Their perversion does surface, and it's just pushed under again and covered over.
Yeah, absolutely. Would you say it's more endemic now than ever, Satanism and
I would say that people have more of a leaning to atheism now. I think Christian values have been very much diluted. I think that is by design. That's a deliberate attack on society in that respect. We look at the wokeness of society now. In my opinion, I class that as evil. I'm not attacking anyone for their sexuality, but in regards to transgenderism and that gender agenda, especially that left-wing politics has, and then imparting their belief system on children. The children are people of pure innocence. They do not need any sexualization whatsoever. So I see that as abhorrent, and I actually see that its roots and its inception are that of evil, because the attack is the innocence of children. And if you damage children, you damage society. And if you do that, you get broken society. Our birth rate is plummeting to a degree that it can't be sustained. That we need to be running at minimum of 2.4 children. I think the last thing I saw was we're on 0.9. Spain's on 0.6. We're just not having kids. Well, the Christian world isn't having kids anyway. But I think atheism is doing a lot to curtail Christianity. I know people are saying about the evasive nature of Islam. People they're called reverting. I mean, there's no way I agree with that, because I was never Muslim. Never want to be one either, and I'm not digging them out. It's their choice, and that's that. But there's no way I'm reverting to that. But as well as like Islam becoming very, very dominant and very evasive, I think that non-belief is even more damaging.
Yeah, it's social engineering. There's like a restructuring of Europe going on, isn't there, with the influx of migrants? Like I said, the LGBT sexuality has become weaponized as well, and also the falling birth rates and the lack of faith in the church, and the strong advent of Islam. There's a complete agenda going on, isn't there, in the West?
Well, also, if we look at the exposure of paedophilia within the church, especially the Catholic Church, what went on there, how it was covered up. I read some statistic that in Southern Ireland, priests that were caught fiddling with kids, they tended to relocate them to the east coast of America. And out of the ones that were perverts that got sent there, 80% of them continued to offend against children. 80%. So it's almost a given that every one of them, that they were just relocated, and the sanction was given, from up high from the Vatican to carry on. So we see that, and of course people then fall away from Christianity. They see it as corrupt. They see it as perverted. And Jesus makes it quite clear that if you cause the young ones to fall away from me, it is better that you put a millstone around your neck and jump into the depths of the sea. That was a warning Jesus came for anyone who spiritually cripples an individual, mainly in their childhood. So if you've got what we're seeing now with priests involved in abuse, both the Anglican Church, both the Protestant and the Catholic remit. If you also get that during the satanic rituals that there are priests that are involved in that, vicars, reverends, rectors, or whatever you might call, again, that causes people to fall away. If you get also the children's homes that were of an ecclesiastical setting, so the very, very large faith care homes in which the abuse was almost a given once they went through them doors, it causes these people to fall away. And then they will impart that view onto their children, and the next 3 generations are destroyed. So it's been, and then of course we're being attacked politically due to the woke agenda. Also the lack of Christianity in schools, the absence of morning prayers, the absence of hymns, and then the evasive nature of Islam, and the protective nature of our government towards Islam as well. We don't see the same protection afforded to the Sikh community or to Hindus at all, but we see it all the time pandering to Islam. I'm not attacking Islam. If I was born in the foothills of the Himalayas, I wouldn't know who Jesus Christ was either. So that's a cultural thing that's ingrained in people, and that's how it is. So it's not me saying that what they're doing is wrong and all that, because that's beyond me to say that. But for me, I think Christianity is the only way, and we're just seeing an attack on anything that is inherently Christian being totally and utterly diluted to a point where it will be now non-existent. I mean, when you look at Christianity, it gave us common law. It gave us, the presumption of innocence and the laws of harm, loss, and nuisance, which cover absolutely everything. And it was adhered to under oath. But it's just a waste of time now. I don't think it's beyond repair. I think there's a huge revival. I think a lot of people are having a spiritual awakening and are going back to source and realizing that the only way out of this is to follow the teachings of Jesus or God, and that's the way forward. And I think they're deliberately underplaying that as well.
Yes.
Sorry, go ahead, Jimmy.
You're always finding good.
I was going to say it's a really tough topic to go on about, because I mean, most people, we're in such a secular world these days where they're worried about the mortgage, they're worried about the job. A lot of people, you start mentioning things like Satanism and stuff like that, and they just go, the mind goes out the window because they just can't comprehend that even exists. But you actually did this professionally, from what I understand, right? You were dealing with these as a former police officer, and is that pretty accurate?
Yeah. Well, I was a child abuse investigative detective, so I, specialised in investigating offences against children, and some of that would err on the spiritual abuse and the ritualistic abuse. Mainly the areas I worked, I've only ever really worked ghetto areas within London. Right. We got a lot of Central and West African churches that cropped up, and there was a lot of abuse from there with a thing called Kindoko, voodoo, very much from the West African community. The Jamaican boys and girls, their version of it was called Obia. All the same. It's all the same. It's the worship of the malevolent and the hierarchy of the demonic realms. You've got witchcraft in this country, and you've got Satanism, but they never really went into it. They knew it went on. There were stated cases such as the Orkney Islands. There were cases that did crop up, Kidwelly and one in Nottingham and things like that. But anyone who spoke about it was just attacked. So what they would rather do is deal with the indictable offences and not the aggravated spiritual offences. So, for example, they would just deal with rape or sexual abuse and not ritualistic, motivated sexual abuse and things like that, child murder. But it's only really when I left the police and I set up a campaign called Voice for the Voiceless, and I would go out there and use my my interview and interrogation skills, as it were, really to interview survivors of abuse. I found that 1 in 10 had a different slant on it. That, you know, 1 in 10 of the victims I spoke to were suffering from a condition known as DID, which is an acronym for a a psychological condition called dissociated identity disorder, aka multiple personalities. And they would all say the same thing, and they would then describe satanic ritual abuse, and it was it was passed on through the family. It was intergenerational. Usually the mother was the main instigator on it, and these children were abused. There was bloodletting, there was sacrifice of animals and children, babies, sometimes homeless people, prostitutes, and it was all done in the name of Lucifer. And you know, that's really where it mainly went. So I campaigned for a long time for the government to start accepting it. And then I came across the RAINS list, Dr. Joan Coleman's RAINS list, which totally endorsed what I was uncovering as well, that this was a reality. The government now have got, is it Project Hydra, and they are now accepting that spiritual abuse does go on, and it should be seen as an aggravated factor to child abuse and to serious offences such as murder, rape and sexual assault. So we've moved a long way. What was once a myth isn't. And now, of course, the Epstein thing, at its very least, it infers that this is ritual abuse. But on many occasions, they're now saying that they were actually doing satanic rituals. There was a very, very brave senior detective, a chief constable, I may add, called Mike Veal. He was in charge of a Wiltshire constabulary, and he took the case on for the survivors of Ted Heath, the former Prime Minister. And Mike Veal openly said on Sky News that there was evidence linking Ted Heath to satanic ritual abuse. And they destroyed Mike Veal, absolutely destroyed him. Lenny Harper, the senior officer, the commanding officer for the inquiry into Haute de la Garenne in Jersey, the kids' home there, he too turned around and said that the children have been abused in ritualistic settings in this place. There was evidence of that was found when they were sort of doing the archaeological dig, and they were exhuming, the skeletal remains of children. He too came under massive monumental attack in doing so. So there is a huge concerted effort to keep this away and keep it played down. I made a prediction on national media. They asked me how I thought this would go, and I said, look, the moment, because in reference to the Epstein list, I said the moment that they publicly reveal the sheer extent of paedophilia and the reality of Satanism, then war begins. And then I said that the victims and survivors have got 2 weeks to a month, in my opinion. I said this, I think it was the beginning of February, maybe late January, to really come forward and speak out, because something will go kaboom and they won't even make back page. Well, look what's happened. Look what's happened. Mm-hmm. You know, we was moving forward. It was coming out, and now bang, they won't even get a look in now, and it will just be swallowed up by the Middle East affairs. So, what do we do?
Would you say? I mean, it sounds like with the families being involved, it's almost like they're recruiting children to fill their roles in Satanism when they grow up. Is that it? Like they're groomed into it, so it seems like a normal way of life.
I mean, they're so broken and so damaged. So, and there is a mind control element to this. It's a very clever thing. So, the dissociated identity disorder, this is where the mind fragments. There is a more deeper thing going on there, but I won't go into that so much. But the mind fragments, and it's because there's a need to for survival purposes. So what the mind does, it pigeonholes trauma. So in every day, you learn by example, you learn by experience. And sometimes we learn if we touch something hot, we know the pain, so we never touch it again. But we can't keep reliving that pain. We can't do it. So it puts it to the back, because otherwise everything we do, all we will see is pain. And these children are tortured. You know, they're born into pain. There's usually the delivery, the maternity delivery. I've heard accounts from Satanists where when a baby's born, they will do things like insert a pen or something into the child's anus to cause pain. They will induce the birth early, so it is traumatic. So the kid is born into a world of trauma from the start. Throughout their lives, that they're subjected to sexual abuse, to rapes, to electric shock treatment, to drownings. Drownings is a very, very familiar one. Beatings, being confined in horrifically claustrophobic spaces for days on end, placed into like cupboards with a rotting corpse of an animal, beaten, whipped. And then what the mind does, it shuts certain elements down. So if a kid is whipped a lot, they will build a character, an alter, and it'll be given a childish name. So these alter characters, of which could be hundreds, could be existing under hierarchical control of stronger alters, will be given very childish names. So they might be, for example, called Whippy. So if you was to go up to one of these adults and whip them, Whippy would take over and they wouldn't feel it. One girl had an alter called Sparky, and her mother would electrocute her regularly. So you could electrocute her as a woman, she wouldn't feel it. And they regress into these alters, which will have a whole persona, what we used to call in the police on the undercover world a legend. So, for example, Sparky will have things that Sparky likes, which will be different to the source person. Some of the alters might be homosexual, where the actual source person isn't. I've even seen cases where the handwriting's different. So the source person might be right-handed, but the alter is left-handed. You know, it's really complex and it's very deep.
This sounds almost like MK Ultra.
Well,
Yeah,
it is.
that.
I mean, that's the base level of it, and that's where it all comes from. So these people have been doing it for generations and generations. And what it does, it causes servitude. When the people come to talk, they can't, because the one of the main governing alters will tell them that whoever they're disclosing to is working for the government, they're a liar. So you'll get a lot of paranoia. So I'll be accused of working for MI6. John Wedger works for MI6. I've had that a million times. You know, these people are nuts. Or a helicopter, police helicopter will go by. Helicopters is a very, very common one with a paranoia of people that are surviving from ritual abuse, because they're taught that we will always view you, no matter where you go, we will see you. The police are involved in this, everything. So they think that the police helicopter is there to follow them. If they see a car parked outside their house, they will think that it's a government agent that's been sent to spy on them. And that is the level of paranoia that goes alongside it. They're broken, so they're remote. So when you abuse a child, right, this is something that people really need to understand, the damage it does. So you can physically, emotionally, and sexually abuse a child, and they can go on to live a fruitful life in respect to education. So we're made up of three parts: the intellectual self, the physical self, and the emotional self. So the intellectual self can adapt and overcome, and people can go on to achieve greatness in respect to their intellectual self. So they can become CEOs of companies, they become officers in the military, and we see this a lot with these elite schools, the elite fee-paying schools, where the survivors of that are caned at a very, very young age, divested from the maternal surroundings, put in a hugely patriarchal society. And then you've got the fagging system that goes alongside that, in which the older boys are given deputised. The discipline is deputised down from the dons of the school to the older boys, who go on to physically abuse and sexually abuse the younger boys, and then they adopt that role the higher up they go. But these people are very emotionally traumatized people, but they go on to achieve greatness in respect to business and commerce. Physically, again, you can beat and bugger a kid all day long, and they will physically or can physically go on to become incredibly powerful, strong warriors, which is nothing more than the Greco-Roman gladiator schools did. They beat and buggered the children, and they created, absolute warriors, and that is the idea. But the chink in their armor is that these people are emotionally broken. So their emotional clock stops at the relevant age when they were abused. So you'll get grown men, highly intelligent, highly physically capable, with the emotional intelligence of a 5-year-old kid, which brings about a petulance, but also a narcissistic trait, because children are born narcissistic. They have to survive, and it will enhance their narcissism. So if we look at the case recently, Channel 4 did a wonderful documentary. I'm not really a fan of them, but they did a great documentary on Bishop John Smythe. Again, a QC, like I mentioned earlier, intellectually top of his game. This guy was an absolute master when it became to be an advocate, a barrister. There was no one finer than him, and he was highly sought after and highly praised. Physically, a man in his 50s, with the physical prowess of a man in his 20s, running up mountains, everything else. Well, doesn't he match the profile I just described? But emotionally, this guy was screwed. He was emotionally stunted and retarded, with the reasoning of a young boy. So as adults, we can hear and we can discuss issues, and we can come to variance and difference on a point. But at what point do we scream at each other and tell each other to F off? We don't, because we're emotionally stable men. And if someone was emotionally retarded, this is where you get things like road rage, where someone gets cut up. The next thing, we've all seen that social media thing of Ronnie Pickering, haven't we?
Yeah.
I have no idea who Ronnie Pickering is. I'm not digging Ronnie Pickering out. I don't know him. I'm not really interested in him. But his behaviour is that of an emotionally stunted individual. A stupid altercation resulting in almost threats to kill a fella. So that shows the petulance of a child. So if you took a toy of a child, take it off one of us, you go, well, I have it, I don't care. Take it off a child, what do you get? I hate you, I want you to die, I'm going to beat you, I'm going to kill you. Because that's the emotionally stunted, retarded individuals. But, this is what happens with people that have been abused. And the majority of domestic violence perpetrators are people that have been abused. There is a hatred of women because the mothers failed to protect. There's been a sexual awakening in there that should not have happened, and that causes frustration, it causes anger. There's a wickedness, and there's a need to control, because they've had no control. The control was taken away from them because someone totally governed everything they did by abuse. So people who commit domestic violence are emotionally damaged, broken people. And we see it everywhere. It's just endemic. And women abuse, not to the same degree as men, but they do abuse. So 1 in 10 sexual abusers of children will be a woman. But how that differs is that women will pick very, very vulnerable and very, very young victims. And that differs from men. And they will also give out very, very spiteful, vicious punishment. And there is a need when a woman abuses to be a need for adoration, to be totally respected, right? Whereas men won't have that. Women will. You must obey me. You will obey me. So when you ever see abuse on by a woman, it's usually on an infant, a toddler, or a baby. Not saying men don't, because they do, but women will have a greater proclivity to do that. And then you've got to go through life with this brokenness. So those satanic abuse, those who take part in it, near enough all of them have come from satanic abuse. Near enough all of them. With people who have been sexually abused, 10% of them will go on to abuse. 10%, which is greater than any other demographic. And then, if you think about that, if they then there was something about paedophile, they will create about up to 120 victims in their lifetime. So if 120 of them, 10%, then 12 go on then to abuse, and then you've got the same pyramid. In one person's lifetime of abusing, they could affect as much as 1,200 people. You know, which is massive, really. You know, and you know, child abuse will affect a very conservative estimate 1 in 4, a realistic estimate 1 in 3. So it's a very, very real problem.
Yeah. Would you say Savile was a Satanist or just a predator?
Yeah. I would say so. I would say he
Who's
was.
that?
Savile, Jimmy Savile.
Oh, yeah.
I would say not only a Satanist. I think Jimmy Savile was a procurer of children. Satanism's very hierarchical because that is the essence of Satanism. You know, there is this hierarchy that must be respected and and adorned at all times. So it's the essence of it. And there is a rank within Satanism called the fixer, and this would be someone who will procure children where needed. And hence the term Jim will fix it. But also, child abuse has got a very, very huge blackmail value to it. So there's many things people can get involved in, and if you know, if the worst comes to worst and someone then gets caught and decides to grass, you know, where's the value in it? Whereas maybe theft or something else probably hasn't got much value. Well, telling me I don't care. Whereas child abuse, you know, no culture allows for it. No culture on this planet allows for child abuse. You know, from established first world communities right the way down to indigenous cultures that are beyond the point of law, that have their own tribal law. They still do not agree with child abuse, and they know the damage it does. So, Savile was a master of procuring children and compromising children. You know, compromising victims. Sorry, not children. Compromising victims, which is probably what we see with Epstein. And then, you know, look at what we had in this country. So we look at Epstein. You know, he had a co-defendant, Jeffrey Epstein, and his co-defendant was Robert Maxwell's daughter, Ghislaine. They were grooming. So what is grooming? Grooming is just ingratiating children in order to coerce them into sex acts. You know, they're taken from point A to point B for the purpose of offending sexually. Well, that's trafficking. And then they then abuse them, which you know, let's make it base level. It's rape. And then when you get Satanism, there's no water in hell. There's no blood in hell. These demons, their currency is blood. Their ultimate currency is the blood of the only nemesis of Satan, that is Jesus Christ. So they will use the nearest thing to him, which is the creation of God. So that's why you will see animals sacrificed, but the ultimate goal is a child, because it is perfect, it is beyond sin, and it is the image of God. It is, you know, it is a personification of God, a child. We were created in God's image. So that's why it has a huge value, and it has a huge currency, and the rewards of bloodletting to the demons are instant. The devil will reward straight away, instantly. You know, God rewards you in his own time and in his own way. But so we'll see, and it's all what's hidden as well. It's all occultic. It's hidden. But we look at Epstein, but we had exactly the same. If you look at his demise, he was found hanging in police custody, and his co-defendant, the woman, was allowed to basically get away with it, although incarcerated. But we had exactly the same. Why do people keep looking at America? We had Fred and Rose West. You can't tell me that they were doing it for themselves. They weren't.
Okay.
You know, there's 30 unsolved murders of young people around these two. They were procuring children, in my opinion, for ritualistic purposes. That's what they were doing. Fred West was very connected to the local police. He was connected to other people. He was involved in what's known as the barn club, in which victims are taken to a barn. You know, well, a lot of ritual abuse goes on in these outside industrial premises, barns, warehouses, and everything else. And how did Fred West die? Under you know, police supervision. Well, at least that of the Home Office. You know, in a Category A prison, found hanging in his cell, exactly the same demise. What did it? And then, of course, what happened to his missus? Again, same as Jazane. You know, in my opinion, that you know they are a bargain basement, a Poundland version of Maxwell and Epstein, and the algorithm's exactly the same.
Yeah.
You know, abusing children and sacrificing children is exactly the same. It's no different.
Could I run? It's interesting, very interesting. I never thought about that. Can I run something by you? There was a school of thought that Peter Sutcliffe didn't work alone, and also that Savile could have been implicated in some of his killings, and also that the killings of the Yorkshire Ripper were actually part of a Masonic ritual. I don't know what is that to a wild theory.
Well, no. I mean, if we keep the Ripper in mind, I'll answer that, and I want to go on to Jack the Ripper because there's something really interesting that went on there. But when we look at the Yorkshire Ripper, the one of the investigating officers said that there was one of the deaths was out of the pattern of offending, because he tended, you know, by the narrative, again, 13 victims, a very occultic number as well, but they were street prostitutes, but one of them wasn't. One of them was a young girl, and Peter Sutcliffe was heard to say, there was a testimony by a witness or something, that when with that girl, he turned around and looked up and said, "Oh no, master, not her." Well, this girl's body was found in the park in is it Alderhay Park in
Roundhay Park.
Roundhay Park. The girl was found in Roundhay Park on the hill leading up to Savile's premises. So again, the you know, reading between the lines here, that when he called out "Oh master," he's actually referring to Jimmy Savile, and the girl was bludgeoned in the head, and Savile used to have a thing saying about women being brain damaged, didn't they? But I think a lot of these murderers they don't work alone. I heard a theory, and again, I don't know that it's fact, but it came from a fairly good source that Ian Huntley, who's now died, that, you know, and I don't want to offend the family or anything like that, so you know, be careful. I'm just saying what I've heard, that there was another man involved, and that guy was a US airman. He was a sort of high-ranked pilot within the US Air Force, and he'd been kicked out of Japan because he'd been involved in the abduction and a rape and attempted murder of 2 young girls in Japan, and he was sent over to the UK, and of course these bodies were found near to a US Air Force base, and the reason it never came out that he was connected was because at the time the US Air Force were using our RAF bases for stopovers to start the bombing campaign in Iraq, and had the British public knew that there was a senior US serviceman involved in one of the most abhorrent sets of murders in the UK that would have hindered their progress there. And that's, you know, again, but it came from a very, very sort of studious, you know, and trustworthy source. So I don't know if there's any mileage in that, but we look at the inspector, the detective inspector Aberline, who went after Jack the Ripper. Whilst he was looking into the Ripper murders, back then the post office, you know, they'd have the postman, and they'd deliver the tangible handwritten letters, as it was back then. They also had the thing called the post office runners, which were young boys would earn a menial crust actually running messages to and from, running alongside the actual postal system. And these boys would be given a message and told, take this message to so and so, and a bit like a carrier pigeon, really. And while Aberline was looking into the Jack the Ripper, he started asking these postal boys, have you seen anything? And one of them said, no, but I want to tell you about something that is going on, and told them about an address which is now in central London near Euston Station, by what's now the Post Office Tower. There's a road called Cleveland Street, called number 19 Cleveland Street. And he said, we keep getting sent to number 19 Cleveland Street, and when they get there, basically they're raped. They're used as rent boys. And this lad said, look, not just me, there's others. So Aberline went and interviewed them, and it was a rent boy racket. So they actually went and kicked the door in number 19, and they found Prince George in there. So, and then it was all covered up. And of course, what went on with the Ripper thing was all shut down and covered up. So we see the same pattern, the same algorithm all the time. This is no different to what we sort of got now, where we've got our very, very, the heart, the monarchy. I mean, how embarrassing, how shameful that one of the heirs to the throne has been kicked out and then on bail for these, offences that he is. It's just, and the allegations that are also coming out of sexual impropriety with young girls. What we got to understand with criminality, Jimmy and Ian, what we've got to look at is this: that your average police officer runs around chasing his tail on housing estates, dealing with the same lower and working class families, which we used to call scroats, right? On a housing estate, there'll be 5 families that will cause misery for everyone, right? Their fathers would have been pains in the arses and their grandfathers would have been. This is intergenerational dysfunctionality, and these people make it a bloody nightmare for absolutely everyone. And it's usually crimes of disorder and dishonesty, violence and stealing. Then they combine that into robbery and burglary and all that. And that's the bread and butter of your uniform patrol officer's diet, right? The same nonsense. And it will never change, because that's just how society is. The majority of that level of crime is committed by the lower and the working classes. End of. It's not snobbery or anything like that. Just look at reality here. Sexual offending against children is totally different, right? It does not know any economic, socio-economic boundaries. It does not know any religious boundaries, right? It doesn't know intellectual boundaries. It doesn't know racial boundaries. The paedophilic community is the ultimate woke community. The left-wing wokeists have got absolutely F all on the paedophiles and the Satanists, right? They are so ahead of it all. This makes me wonder where did it come from? Because paedophilia and Satanism is the ultimate in wokeism. They don't care where a kid comes from. They don't care what religion it is, what colour it is. They don't even care what gender it is. We used to term them trisexuals. They're not hetero. They're not homo. They're not bi. They're tri. They will try anything. If they like girls, they'll do a girl. Well, if a girl's not there and there's a boy, they'll do a boy. They might like them prepubescent. But if one's not about, they'll get one with pubes. It don't bother them. They'll do it anyway. They don't care, And this is where paupers know kings. Because, go back to what I said earlier, these are emotionally broken people. Their sexuality is swayed, is twisted, it's distorted, it's been awoken, right? Their reasoning is gone. It's out the window because of what they've endured, right? So if we took a kid from a kid's home, of which there were many, many throughout the 50s and 60s, post-war Britain was awash with these kids' homes, right? And they were residential homes, and a lot of them were ecclesiastical. And these kids went there, they were beaten, the discipline was harsh, the regime was harsh, and there was just endemic sexual abuse of these children, right? And then it caused a lot of problems with them, right? And these came from the lower and the working classes. They went on to, not all of them, and I'm not painting a brush over all of them at all. Please, if you think I'm offending you by saying this, I'm not. I'm a supporter and advocate for the victims and survivors. But you know, you can't make an omelette without breaking eggs, can you? So that's that. You know, and then we you know, where does alcoholism come from? Where does domestic violence, what we cover, where does that come from? Heroin addiction, a need to anesthetize yourself. Heroin is an analgesic. It is a painkiller. Where does that pain come from? It's not just physical. It's emotional. It's mental. And taking that little brown powder will totally detach you from that reality. You know, someone said to me once, "So I've been wrapped in cotton wool and floating off to heaven." So you've got all these issues that they're harboring throughout their lives. A lot of these survivors are self-employed. You know, they can't work under the governance of another because that is classed. Once someone has some sort of authority of them, that's an abusive environment. And there's another really sad issue that comes to this, where a grown man is not designed to penetrate a young boy or young girl. No one is designed, nothing is designed for the penetration of a child. Right, that's what puberty is all about. That's what maturity, physical maturity, is all about, and the so-called coming of age. You know, the bodies cannot cope with it, and as a result, they get damaged. So a young boy's anus will not accommodate a grown man's penis. It won't do it. It will tear. It will rip. And an anus, no matter what the liberals and the leftists say, is not a vagina. A vagina is a wall of muscle which is designed to expand and contract and continue doing its job. An anus is a sphincter muscle. It is a hoop of interconnecting chain-like muscles. And if you breach them by buggery or whatever, you will tear them and they will not do their job. So the recipient of this vile abuse will have a body part that doesn't do its job, aka it will leak. It will emanate not only gas but also liquid and solid. So in essence, these poor souls, not all of them, but there are many, and it's something they don't talk about because it's dehumanizing and it's shameful, and it's not their shame to carry, and they will smell. So they can't work in an office environment or a group environment for this fundamental rudimentary reason, right? And it causes anger, and it causes pain, and it causes shame, and it causes all manner of issues. There are men that have contacted me that are going through divorces because they cannot sleep in the same bed as their wife or their woman because they defecate themselves at night. You know, there are men that do their own washing because they've just destroyed their underpants each day, and they're too ashamed and embarrassed. This is what these bastards do when they abuse kids. And women, they get misaligned wombs. A girl's vagina is not designed for a man. It's not designed for anything like that. It's in its development stage. You will misalign that womb. That will cause complications in birth. That will cause miscarriages, and it can also cause sterility, especially if there is STDs. So say this is the lower and the working classes go through this, but don't you think the boys that go to these elite fee-paying schools? I've spoken to survivors of Radley College, of Winchester, of Eton, of Sherborne, the top prep schools in the world. How many world leaders and premiers in our political realm have gone to Eton? 19 of them. And they tell me of the first night there, they cry because they're a little boy and they're away from home. And they're taken into the head's office and they are caned on the bare buttocks by a grown man, which lacerates, their arse and their legs. They're told to shut up or they'll get more. So they then repress that. They hide that pain away. They become withdrawn. They have a need to please everyone. And then the fagging system, these men, young boys that are absolutely buzzing with testosterone. The regime keeps them at the very peak of their physical fitness, the cold showers and all that, and then they are sodomized. And I've heard many cases of that, being sodomized, not only by the older boys, but also by the dons who've been through the same system. And they leave there and they go to Sandhurst, they go into the city, they go into commerce. And of course, like we mentioned earlier, the narcissistic traits are in there. And these are broken, damaged individuals, men. And I'm not berating them, I'm not putting them down. My heart goes out to them because I've spoken to many, many, many of them. And a guy told me he was abused in Eton. And his father went to Eton. The fellow who told me this is an elderly man now. So his father, we may well be going back 100 years ago. I don't know, a very long way, I would have thought. And he said there was a headmaster at the time at Eton who had a heart for the young boys, which was nice of him. And he knew that these young boys were, away from home. They were homesick, they were frightened, they were scared. So he would take the most vulnerable ones. Again, very benevolent of the chap, because they knew that these are parents that were away on business or in the military. They knew it, so no one was coming for these kids. He'd take them back to his home, and he'd read them, give them cocoa and a bedtime story, but at the same time he'd masturbate them. Right. So if we look at this, and then he was telling me we need an inquiry into these elite fee-paying schools, and I said, no, you effing well don't. You don't need no inquiry. We just had the inquiry. We had the IICSA inquiry led by Professor Just Alexis J, which went on for 8 years and concluded 5 years ago with 20 recommendations to be implemented immediately to safeguard children. 5 years, not one's been implemented at a cost of 200 million quid. And what they do, blame Kashmiri cab drivers for it all. It's absolute farce. I'm not saying they don't do it. There's not this Asian grooming gang thing. But if we look, we don't need an inquiry. We've got the law, right? This, back in the day, he was getting to know these young boys. We call that grooming. He was taking them back to his private study and his home to masturbate them. So he's moving a kid from point A to point B for the purpose of crime. We call that trafficking. And then he was sexually assaulting them. And I no doubt he went further and he raped them. I no doubt he did. I don't know that for a fact, but I no doubt he did. So what makes him any different to the perverted priests in the Catholic institutions? What makes him any different to the Kashmiri grooming gangs of Bolton, Burnley and Blackburn? Nothing. No different. It's the same algorithm, right? And they're doing the same destruction for the next 3 generations in society. 80% of the prison population come from childhood abuse. You stop fiddling with kids, you will see society change in a heartbeat. It's a no-brainer. And where does Satanism come in this? Well, anyone who sticks their phallus in a child is doing the devil's work, because you are going to destroy that soul. And look at the amount of suicides we have, especially amongst young men. It's skyrocketing. How many of them have been abused? I'm telling you, quite a few, and the girls, quite a few. See, you're condemning them. You're cutting their lives short, and it's evil, and you're doing the devil's work. Well, I don't care if people don't believe in the devil. That's not my issue. You'll find out soon enough. That's down to you, what you want to do and what you don't want to do. But the devil is real, and he's come to destroy, and that's his job. He has come to destroy, to divide and destroy. That's his job, and he's doing a damn good job of it, because people just don't believe. They think that religion causes war. Well, Jesus Christ is not about religion. Jesus Christ, where 2 or more stand in my name, that is the church. I'm not on about the ecclesiastical institutions. I don't care for them. So there's people need to be educated to this. But a bit of a no-brainer. Stop messing with kids. And the other thing, let me give you another stat, which when I say it upsets people, certain communities get very upset with this. Again, I don't care. I'm not here to placate the adult. You're grown men, you're grown women, you've got shoulders. Children can't do that, So I'm here to voice protection for them. I don't care if I upset adults. I don't give a monkeys, right? The one element that is going to cause a child 30 times more likely to be sexually abused and raped in their own home, and that is the presence of a step parent. And look at our society with the baby mummy, baby daddy culture, terms I absolutely find abhorrent, immature, disgraceful. And there are some cultures that really seem to endorse this baby daddy, baby mummy culture. More so, it's across the board. But a little while back, it weren't so much. Right? It's wrong. Do not do it. You weaken that protection around your child. And I get there's people in marriages and in relationships that aren't working. I get it. I was a single parent. I get it. I was a step parent. I get it. I never went abused, but there's many that do. And then you've got these girls advertising themselves on these dating websites. I'm a mum I'm an independent woman, boom, boom, boom. Well, that is gold dust to the pervert. Absolutely gold dust. So, yeah, and that's it. It's endemic in our culture. And what is our society doing to bring this moral fibre back? Absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. And the more wokeism is allowed to run amok, the weaker it becomes. And the victim are not, the gender neutral, non-binary, spiky-haired school teacher or whatever. The victim here is the child, So, rant over.
No, it's fine, but society is designed to be broken, isn't it? Like you said, it's run by these damaged, psychopathic people.
Yep.
So it's completely engineered to be this way. It's not a case of it is broken. It's designed to be.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, and it's kind of endemic paedophilia in the system, from the top to the bottom. It's riddled in it.
Well, if you abuse children, you ruin society, and that is a goal. And that's how it is. If you bring your kids up the right way, you'll have a lovely, strong family. But if you don't, it goes on. I mean, if you've got a puppy and all you did was kick it all over the place, stick things up its bum, I mean, what sort of dog are you going to breed? That thing will bite anyone's face off, won't it? But if you get a puppy and give it love and take it for walks and look after it, it'll be a companion for life. So it's a no-brainer. And yet we do this to kids all the time. And they've made now, like fostering is now a business. There's no sort of emotional attachment to it. It's just seen as a business way of making money out of brokenness. Instead of putting it right, we're just encouraging it. And children are just a cash cow for the legal system. So you get a broken family, a damaged family, you end up in family court, they get represented, and the state picks up the bill for that, and these solicitors, win or lose, get paid $4.50 an hour. I mean, what other business would you get that? Win or lose, if you're good or shit at your job, you will still get paid top dollar. Yeah. And then the kids then run amok because they're damaged, they're broken, so they misbehave in school, they kick off. There's family court proceedings, so we pick up the tab for that. The kid then gets into trouble. The juvenile court, we pick up the tab for that. They then kick off and cause trouble and break into houses and smash people up. The magistrate's court kicks in, we pay for that. And then the Crown Court, where ultimately they end up stabbing someone to death or whatever. And we pick up the tab for that. And then ultimately they're found suicided or overdosed. And the coroner's court comes in and we pick up the tab for that. And then all the time we're picking up the tab for keeping someone banged up in prison, or we're keeping them for the pharmaceutical industry to medicate them, or whatever it goes. And on it goes and on it goes and on it goes, and we're just perpetuating it and feeding this beast. And no one is stepping in and saying, do you know what? Stop. And what my point here, if it may be subtextual, right? But my point here, we've all got a responsibility. We can't keep pointing the finger and saying social workers steal children, the police just protect paedophiles. That's what you call tertiary blame. Where's the primary blame? Why are the family courts involved? Because mum and dad aren't doing their job. And why are the social workers knocking on the door? Because the situation has deteriorated so bad that we're there. And then why are the police involved? Because these people have kicked off because they can't behave or they're drunk or whatever. I'm not judging anyone. Let's just call it out for what it is. If we don't address this, and take it right back to its roots, and this is emotionally broken people, and try and get some sort of therapy, and it goes to those that are banged up for offences against children. Why have you done this? Why have you done this? And we need to know that if these people are going to be released, which a lot of them are, what are we releasing to society? We need to be releasing good people. I'll just turn this around because the lads coming in. We need to be releasing people in society that aren't going to go on to attack and abuse. No, I'm cool, brother. I'm cool. Yeah. So and that's that. But no, I'm in central London, and I sort of help out a lot of the lads that work out here, and a lot of them they're fasting because Muslim guys, so they
No worries.
They come and use my venue and all that to break their fast and things like that. So again, we've got to strip it back and instead of protecting the wrongdoers, but we're all guilty of it, and that's the thing. We're all guilty. I'm guilty of being a single parent, and not bringing up my kids in that wholesome family environment. I have my reasons, but still, at the same time, I've got responsibility, and I shedded that responsibility. So and we've got to all do that. Stop pointing the finger and look at ourselves and say, do you know what? We can turn this around.
Do you know what, John? If anybody's watching this who's suffered from any form of abuse, but has lived with it and never gone, just living with it and has never told anyone about it, and is living in kind of trauma with that, what advice would you give them to?
Try and get help. I know it's scant at the moment, and now mental health therapy, cognitive therapy, talking therapy is just not really fit for purpose. Do your best to and strip it back and see, why am I here? And there'll be some painful truths, and maybe mum didn't do her job, maybe dad weren't the best dad that you thought he was, and for me, God loves you. You're a child of God. You are wanted. You are loved. And whatever you're going through, because someone did something to you, it's not your shame. You had no choice. They put this on you. You are not to blame. And unfortunately, our society and our system blames the victims. They have campaigns called Just Say No. Why is it down to a child to say no? It's not down to a child to say no, because a child should never be in a position where they have to say no to an abuser. An abuser should not be doing it, full stop. It's down to the abuser to not do it. The owner should not be put on a responsibility, and the shame should not be put on the child. And I'll go further, Jimmy, than to try and speak out to the survivors. I'm going to go to the abusers, and I'm going to say, if you are abusing a child, you must stop it now. You've been through that pain. People say they have no empathy. That's bullshit. They do have empathy because it was done to them. They know the fear. They know the pain. They know the humiliation. They know it. That is empathy. They do have empathy. But they have no sympathy. They don't care. They're selfish, narcissistic, vile, evil. What they're doing is evil. You're destroying lives. Stop it now. And what I say to them, go to the police and tell them everything you've done. And not only that, tell the police about all the others that are doing it with you. All those that are in your group, in your email lists, all of them. And protect the survivors that are going through it now. And if it means you get banged up, then you need to pay that debt. And I call out to Satanists, because Satanists contact me quite a bit. I do talk to them. And a lot of them are broken. They've come from terrible, terrible pain. And I'm saying, do not worship this God. He is a liar. Jesus called him the deceiver. Right? He speaks the language of deception, the language of lies. He was a murderer from the start. He is a liar. He is going to destroy you. Go to Jesus. Repent for what you've done and go to Jesus before it's too late. You don't want to go to taking your last breath, having an alignment to death. Because it's necromancy. You're worshipping death. It's all about death. You've been given the gift of life. Do not worship death. Worship life. And life is Christ. So, it is. And a Satanist once said to me, and he went, look, I was abused as a kid. My mum and dad were Satanists, and I was abused in rituals. I've seen some terrible things. I said, well, why have you gone to it? And he went, well, your God. You're not my God, Jesus. Everyone's God. But he said he was never there. He was never there. And I want to go on about this because I want to answer this point properly, right? And not come across as someone who's a religious zealot, because hopefully I'm not, right? He said he weren't there when I was being abused. Where was Jesus? Where was your Jesus who loves his children so much? Where was he when I was being raped and abused? I'll tell you what, John, he weren't there. I said, but he was. He held your hand. He was. But that's no consolation to this broken man, and it was not. I understand, but I don't agree. So he said, I went to the only one that will put this right. And it was a God that gave me comfort, but it also gave revenge because these people need to pay for what they've done. And it was Lucifer. And if you look at the Church of Satan, the manifesto, which was written by Anton LaVey,
Yeah.
you look at the manifesto for the Church of Satan, it looks like the best, fairest political party going. We are against tyranny. We're in balance with nature. We're against bullying. We're against this. But also, they put themselves above judgment, and you are the gods. There is no God. You are the gods, which is where things go awry very, very quickly. But this guy wanted to do hold a witch's moat, a witchcraft ritual for my protection and a safe journey in the job I'm doing in exposing ill doing against kids. And I said, yeah, no, thank you so much for the offer, but I'm going to decline it. I say no, please don't. My protection comes from Jesus and not from this malevolence. But going back to what I suppose qualifies me to speak like this is that in amongst the pain and suffering I went through as a police whistleblower, in which I stood up and spoke out about the deliberate cover-ups of children that were being pimped out. And may I add, they weren't predominantly done by Kashmiri cab drivers. If there was any ethnic group that was in main prevalence here, it was the Jamaican Yardies in London. Anyway, that was 20 odd years ago. They were the main sort of perverted group that were trafficking and abusing these kids. But again, we never hear about that. We never hear about gangs within the traveller community that are doing it either. And there are all sorts of communities, and I'm not knocking any of them, but it goes on in every community. But I think sometimes that people are frightened to call out certain communities because they're physically intimidated by them.
Yeah.
But I'm not. If you abuse a kid, there's no strength in that at all. You're weak. But in amongst my whistleblowing, the police tried to imprison me on 9 separate occasions, and my home was nearly took from me. And I was rock bottom, but I was a single parent of 4 kids. In amongst that, one of my children was involved in a very serious, life-changing, life-altering accident in which his upper vertebrae of his spine was severed by 96%. He was in a coma. He had sepsis. He suffered a cardiac arrest, and his brain shut down because he died, and was pronounced dead after 10 minutes. An algorithm and heart murmur was detected after quite intensive CPR, which then aggravated his injury. So he was put on life support for a period of 5 days before they turned the machine off because he was classed as brain dead. And he was paralysed, full total body paralysis. There was absolutely no hope for him, no prognosis at all for the boy. And in amongst that, I went into a chapel in the hospital, and I broke down, and I called God out, and I attacked God, and I said, "How can you? How, if you're a God of love, if you're a God who cares for children, me as the detective who went out there and spoke out to protect the children, look at how you're punishing me." I was really, really bullied and beaten. I'm not just saying that bullying like someone, turn my locker upside down or call me a horrible name. I mean, this was bullying in its rawest form, and it was affecting my kids and everything. And what I've done, nothing. I'd done the right thing. I had no money. I didn't gain in any way from this. And now my son is dying. My son actually was dead. And I said, how can you be a God? How can you be a just God? How can you be the good shepherd who looks after them? And the Bible fell open in front of me. How that happened, I don't know. Maybe it was an accident, who knows? But it opened on Psalm 23. And if you read the passage of Psalm 23, it says in there, God says, I lay a place for you at the table of thine enemies. And I thought, well, this is what's happened. Maybe this is a script. Maybe I've been placed in amongst, in between, in the presence of evil. And it says, as I walk through the valley of shadow of death, I was walking through that. My son was declared dead. No one knows the pain unless you've been a parent who's been through that. It's the most stabbing, numbing, awful pain. And it says, I will fear no evil, for I am the rod, the staff, and he walks through, he told you, no matter what you go for, I'm with you. And then I went back, I prayed, and I said, if you really are this God of love, and you are the good shepherd, that boy in there is a little lamb. He's my little lamb. Give him back. Go after him, Jesus. Bring him back. And I will follow you. I will do your work. And I went back and I kissed my son goodbye. And as I went to leave the hospital, he woke up. And 2 weeks later, he walked out the hospital. And it was classed as a miraculous recovery. There was no explanation for it. His body was absolutely broken. His spinal column was severed. It was just like a pack nail. It was like open like that. It was just, but it happens. It does happen. You get this. So I was in the same position as that Satanist. I was calling out God, saying, how dare you, how dare you? But I had a life-changing and supernatural experience with Jesus.
Yeah.
And I went on to do that. I take people to Christ where I can. I work with a lot of ex-offenders, a lot of very, very serious and dangerous gangsters. I baptized or organised a baptism and took part in it of a guy in your part of the world, a very, very infamous gangster from Liverpool called Stephen French.
The devil.
The devil. Just before Christmas, we baptized him. So I've seen it happen. And I wish him all the best in his spiritual journey. There's a man that is really moving forward, and I no doubt there are a lot of demons of his past that he really needs to sort of get out there, get rid of, but he's doing it. He's a guy that's doing his best to stop young men from suicide, and he's only got to save one of them, and that there's no riches in the world that can compare to that. The savior of one life. So I've seen it. So that's what qualified me to say to this non-believer, or actually a hater of God, mate, you're wrong. But I'll do it in the most diplomatic way I can, So, but it's up to people. They've got their own way, own way. And again, same with, I'm not against this, Muslims. They're good people. I've got good friends. I work a lot with young offenders. Most of them are Muslim guys. The guy I've just seen there, he's my good friend. He's fasting. He believes in his God, and he's a good man. So I'm not going to go out there and cuss it and all that. But I think it's been weaponized. Yeah. And I think the target is the Christians. I think it's a two-pronged attack, with Islam and atheism. And socialism to totally crush us, utterly crush us. And they look like they're doing quite a good job of it, but they ain't getting me. That ain't happening.
No.
I think
sorry, Ian, go. No, sorry, go.
So that's one of the common things, isn't it, when something bad happens, especially if somebody does have a faith. It's almost like it's a knee-jerk response to blame that God. But, a lot of times people don't think that, the unconditional love of giving somebody free will also includes,
amen, yeah,
some shit that can happen,
cool. Well, the thing is, it's not so much people having a faith, it's people having a belief. The faith is you carry on. You believe. Do you know what I mean? That is the faith. And what is faith if it's not tested? And it is just a test of faith, and that's it. And Jesus said, "You will suffer in my name." It is going to happen. We live in a very, very wicked world. And look at the spoils of wickedness. Look at Epstein living a life of pure opulence. leisure and pleasure, the senses totally satisfied all the time. We see it constantly on social media. You watch TikTok, and these TikTok influencers eating the best food, and then going to Dubai, and they're doing this, and it's, there's one, he calls himself the brass father because he boasts about how many prostitutes he's had, and they're getting paid, 40,000-50,000 pound a month on social media for this life of total abhorrence and indulgence and iniquity and everything else. And and young people think, well, that's the way. Why should I graft hard? Why should I be a good person? Because it don't pay. And they've totally lost their way. Whereas the moral code we used to work by would say, well, yeah, I get that, but ultimately it is not worth it. It's not worth it. I mean, I've done so much work with a lot of ex offenders and ex organised criminals. Apart from the occasional few, they've got nothing. The whole life of crime, what they got? They've got nothing but memories of being put in a cell, 9 foot by 9 foot, whatever, with another man, year after year, while the other man's crapping, urinating, masturbating, crying and everything else next to them, when they should be at home with their children, with their family, walking, and all that, and they see that as a viable alternative. Oh, mate, no way. There's no reward there at all. It's just twisted logic. And then they've got no tradecraft because they never did an apprenticeship. It was just crime. So they can't use their hands. They can't use their, and then they just use a trail of destruction behind them. It's like one very infamous criminal turned around to me and he said, what have I done? He said, my parents gave me a beautiful garden and I ran through it, ripping up all the flowers. That's what I did. My selfishness in crime. A guy that went away for murder, got an infamous murder. And he said, I just destroyed it because that's all I wanted. That's all I knew. And there is another way. So, this is where we've got to start turning this around and re-educating people and saying, no, there is another way. But, unfortunately, things are getting so awful now that being the good guy doesn't pay.
I was just going to say that historically, I mean, whistleblowers, even if you look at like the well-known ones, Edward Snowden or Julian Assange or whatever, they do get a bad rap, and it's a persecuted life almost. Do you have any advice for people that are sat on information that want to come forward with it, but are thinking, well, Christ, all this stuff could happen? Is there?
Yeah, I have, and it's not one you're going to expect. I'm going to say, don't do it unless you've really got the appetite for it. There's a beautiful individual, and I'm going to call his name because I think he deserves the praise, and the government need to give this man an apology. And he's the ultimate police whistleblower, a man called Mike Veal. And Mike Veal, if you watch this, God bless you. You are a man who truly did serve the people of this country and the vulnerable. Mike Veal was the one who took the inquiry out against Ted Heath. He was the chief constable of Wiltshire, and he said to me, John, anyone who thinks they can take this government on and win is an effing idiot. And I would totally concur with that. Be very, very careful. It's like when people, like, they want to take on the police, or they go into the public order situations, they talk to the police. I say to them, listen, the police are like wasps. Leave them alone. You go near them, you're going to get stung. And like with the whistleblowing, I paid a terrible price, a really, really terrible price. I recently ended up in hospital with very, very profound physical health. I've always looked after myself, but because of the torment I went through and the stress and the pain, it's taken its toll on me. And I suffered some very, very severe medical complications because of the mental trauma I went through. I nearly lost everything. I've nearly lost 2 children whilst I've been on this campaign. That'll be a combination of a concerted, brilliant effort, but also looking into the ritualistic side of things like Satanism, because Satanism is veiled in a curse. So I would say to anyone that wants to look into Satanism, unless you are covered by the blood of Jesus Christ, you will pay a terrible price and you won't even know it. It's totally saturated in a curse, and people don't realise it. They start looking into it. They don't believe in God. They don't believe in Jesus. They believe in crystals and ascended masters and all sorts of other bizarre things. And the next thing, they get sick. They lose their job. They get arrested for something. I've seen it happen on every single occasion. I've seen it happen. You know, you need to be very, very strong if you are going to look into this, because it's dangerous, very, very dangerous. But yeah, if you're going to stand up and speak out, you will do it on your own. No one will stand by you because no one's got the balls to do it. They haven't, and you will be punished so severely. But I think that people like Lenny Harper, Mike Veal, myself, that were the police whistleblowers, I think we have cleared the path, really. I don't think the government, the institutions can't get away with fobbing people off like they did before, because we have brought this out to the light. We have exposed this. So whereas when I spoke out, what was classed as incredulous, it was totally outside of people's reality, but it doesn't make it a myth because of that. Now it's been corroborated. 20 years down the line, I waited 20 years for corroboration. I have 20 years, 10 of it outside of the police, and the 10 before whilst in it. And I've been ridiculed, again, accused of working for the government, working for the intelligence services, and all this. So your reputation gets tarnished and attacked, and the Satanists do it. If I would put out a fundraising thing, the satanic groups would then complain to GoFundMe or whatever the other would, and get it shut down. They will write to, if someone sponsors me, they'll write to them. If I'm doing a public talk, they'll contact the people and say, "Oh, John Wedger's this, John Wedger's that."
Yeah.
They do all this. Do you know what they are? When I first took this fight on him, I thought that taking on this malevolence, I would be fighting a grizzly bear or wrestling with a great white shark. That was the analogy of my enemy, and in reality, they're like little mosquitoes that just bite you in the middle of the night. They're like a stone in your shoe. They're like a breadcrumb in your sheet. They are minor level, spiteful, embittered, emotionally immature individuals. So this is what they are. That they're not the brave sort of masculine type.
No.
Do you know what I mean? Bold sort of adversary. No, they're not. They're horrible, spiteful, girly little twisted individuals. But there's a huge price. I would say to anyone, know your stuff, and is it worth it? Is it really, really worth it? I'm just giving really. What do they used to call it in the police? A risk assessment. This is a risk assessment. Is it proportionate? Is it necessary? Is what you're doing legal? And a lot of people they run their mouth off, and they go into the world of libel, and the next thing they're shut down or they're sued. And I've seen that many times. Or they'll get conspiratorial. They'll get in with various elements of the survivor community that might not be mentally stable, and the next thing they're accusing everyone of eating children and flying over the ice wall and linking in with Klaus Schwab, and thinking, ain't no one going to believe you. I'm not saying it might or might not happen, but pretty much keep it where people can stick to it.
What are your thoughts on there's certain whistleblowers obviously that you can tell they're very genuine guys, like William Cooper, Phil Schneider, different type, mostly UFO stuff and things like that. But I mean, they end up suicided or this, that, and the other. And then there's certain people that get a huge platform and they're allowed to carry on, whether it's through streaming service.
You've answered your own question, haven't you? There, really.
It's allowed to go on, right? They've been given a platform to satisfy almost.
And again, and then they compete with each other. I mean, this isn't a monopoly. You know that you get that in the survivor community, they'll compete against each other. So with the survivor community, the biggest enemy is them themselves, because they will compete with each other and argue. And I've seen so many groups set up, run by survivors, that all of a sudden they've collapsed because of infighting. So you'll get infighting, but again, other. I've seen it all with what would you call them? The alternative media and this sort of stuff. These people come and then they're soon gone, or they'll do incredibly well, and then you think, well, is it really reliable what they're saying? Are they just basically sort of fiddling with the parts of the establishment, which some of them are? Yeah, I'm very dubious. I don't really put my faith in many of them. I mean, you've only got to look at people like John F. Kennedy. He was warning society about it, and they blew his brains out. You know, I used to work with one of the senior detectives on the Diana inquiry, and he turned around to me and he said, anyone who thinks it's an accident is a bloody idiot. She was done in, you know, and done in publicly as well. You know, did she speak out? Well, no, she didn't. She sort of privately did, didn't she? She said certain things that got into the public domain that really damaged the royal family. I think the royal family was screwed once she was outed. I think that was it. That was the end of the royal family in this country. But I think potentially she could have caused them severe problems, Diana, because once you start waking up and once you really start having a heart and saying, do you know what, I might be involved in this, but it's wrong. You know, there's a problem. There's a massive problem. And, you know, and same with a lot of whistleblowers in crime. Well, where do they come from? They tend to be the criminals themselves who woke up one day and said, you know what, this is so wrong, what I was involved in. And then they start telling it warts and all. You need the insiders to come forward. We need Satanists to come forward and start speaking out, you know, and saying, look, this does go on. And there is one guy at the moment, there's a South African guy, isn't there, who's an ex-Satanist who's speaking out. I don't know how long he'll last. God willing, he'll last for a long time. But and then you don't know if they're working for the intelligence services. I part of my job in the police was I used to recruit informants. So I used to go into the prison system, and people that were in for very lengthy custodial sentences that were involved in organised crime. Because I was a good communicator, I would be sent in to offer them deals. So come and work as an informant, and you'll be amazed at how many did, and they did, and they would be used to go back and infiltrate their own community, and be serving me with information which I would pass on to police agencies, sometimes to the intelligence agencies. Well, on all the time, we were trading info all the time, and it sort of sickened me with the criminal community, because where do informants come from? They don't come from decent, straight-going people. These informants come from that. You know, that they are. The criminal world is a very selfish world, and it's full of people who can't be asked really to go and work properly. They're just selfish. They want to sit on their ass and do nothing. And when they want something, they go and take it. And then of course you've got all this adoration in society, writing books and they were stand-up guys. No, they weren't. They were horrible. They were bullies. They were thieves and they were liars. And loads of them would have been informants. So I know how that trading information works. We call it informants. On an international level, they call it spying. It's all the same thing. They're grasses. They're just grasses. And you will get them. I see so much of it with the alternative media community and with these groups that are set up. You know, the alt-right, and then you've got sort of like the anarchist movements and all that. I know for a fact that they will be heavily infiltrated and saturated with undercover police operatives and informants. You know, my mate, he was one of the guys that was on the infiltration unit, and he said the easiest ones to deal with were like the green activists. He said, because all you had to do was smoke a joint and they instantly accepted you. He said they were the most weak-minded, you know, subversive group going, and he said that the hardest ones were the gypsy travelling community because there's a provenance there. You need to know who someone is, and outsiders don't. They're not in. They're not part of
the tight, aren't they?
Yeah. It was just another thing they used to use, and the guy sort of up your way, Jimmy, he was very difficult for the police to catch. Was Curtis Warren?
Okay, yeah, cocky.
You know, he was very. They struggled for a long time because he knew how it worked, and no doubt police were telling him, and he knew that the police officers on undercover deployments, because of the provisions of what they work with, you know, the Human Rights Act and the what was the other one? It comes to me in a minute. It's all to do with how evidence is gathered. They couldn't use children. So if anyone new turned up on the scene and said, "Yeah, I want to get involved in, you know, moving a bit of heroin about, whatever," he'd say, "That's okay. Come and meet with me. We're having a barbecue. Bring your missus and kids along." And of course, the police would say, "Oh, you know, you ever watch that film Donnie Brasco? Oh, I'm an orphan, or I'm divorced, or I'm that." You know, it made me laugh because it's so typical. And they might be genuine, but he couldn't risk it. So he used to just pretend to piss off and say, no. You want to know, bring your missus, bring your kids along. And that to be kids, they couldn't be like grown men, you know, and all that. Because he knew fundamentally, and it was them simple little rules that kept him basically out of prison for a lot. Well, they got him in the end, and they will get him in the end. But you know, everyone's got a weakness, and they know it. It's called profiling. You know someone's weakness. You watch them. You know what's going to bring them down, and then you infiltrate them. And it's so any group that says they're not infiltrated, nah, come on now, you know. And Satanists do the same. You know, when you talk to people that have gone to satanic rituals, the first thing they do, there will be a blood sacrifice. And if someone is initiated, it will be that of a baby. And they'll cut the throat, and they'll let the blood, and everyone must drink it. Everyone. So if you're sent there on a covert deployment, and then there'll be a sex orgy in which children may or may not be used in it, but you know that's what will be put on you. So where does that, you know, what's the risk assessment there? You know, the collateral damage there is too high, so they can't do it. They just can't get in on it. And they know that is the case. They know that that's what they do. So very, very tricky. And then people are compromised, aren't they? And a lot of these venues, like we see with the Epstein, it'll be the same with the ritualistic stuff. It will all be video and audio recorded. And it will be there, and it will have huge blackmail value. If people were really told the truth about what's going on, I'm telling you, they'd have heart attacks. They would not accept it. And they have idolatry. They idolise footballers. They idolise actors and singers. And they refuse to accept that these are perverts, refuse to accept it. And even when the evidence is given to them, they still don't accept it. So what can you do with these people, you know?
It's people aren't accepting what they're being told now. And I mean, we're not even being told about... I mean, it was one thing to have a whole island where children were taken to be abused. That's one thing. But then when you get into something like ritualistic abuse, or even they're talking now about eugenics and cloning and all kinds of things that were coming out of these labs and these islands, and I think there was even a submarine connection there to get there more covertly. But I mean, these are redacted files from the government, and people are reading them, and just, you know, it's like you can't get through.
Well, and not only that, if you think about it, they serve D notices, right, on journalists and that. So, but what is a D notice? A D notice is a defence notice. Winston Churchill brought them into play. First World War, loose lips sink ships.
Yeah.
So if it's a defence notice, it's within the realms and the remit of the defence organisation, which is the military intelligence. Civilian police have no jurisdiction in respect to the defence. It has to be used by military tool, right? So MI6, MI5 will issue D notices. Ministry of Defence will issue D notices to silence people, not the police, because they can't. And why? Because when someone is compromised and they are in a political situation, or they're in a position of privilege and power, right, that they could cause political or economic instability or what's the other one? Or confidence, right? A loss of confidence, which could be a politician that's got a thing for little boys, and there's evidence that he's been with a little boy. And if the other side got to know about it, like Putin said, your vampire ball is over. And he's called the UK politics out for being the bunch of perverts that they are. And so the intelligence services then come in and they manage that situation then. And it's all down to blackmail. And I remember talking to one guy about this. And this was a guy who actually published the guest house list. He's dead now. And I turned around and said, why do they keep these files in the police? I'm not saying I was ever involved in this, but in the police, if there was contentious paperwork, it got burnt. It just got burnt, and that was that. That's where it ended up. It ended up being burnt in a bin on night duty, and that was it. There was never any trace of it again. I said, well, why don't they do what the police are doing? Just burn it. And he went, because it's got huge blackmail value. So they keep it and retain it. And this is what we're seeing with the Epstein thing. The whole thing was a setup from the start. And the people that are going there, princes, heads of big companies and all that, well, what did we say at the beginning? These are people that have come out of these elite educational establishments that are emotionally broken. And they are absolutely ripe to be blackmailed and to be coerced and everything else, because they are emotionally broken people. Anyone of any sort of emotional strength or stature wouldn't even be there. They'd say, do you know what? I'm not doing this. It's like that saying about Puff Daddy, what happens in a Diddy party stays in a Diddy party. Well, we've all been to parties, all of us. At what point does a party descend into depravity that you have to say, do you know what, mate? I'm keeping my mouth shut about this. I'm off. There is absolutely. I've never been in that situation. I've never been compromised like that. Dog barking. I've never been compromised like that, but these people have. So what must have gone on in these parties that you're not prepared to talk about? I mean, the only thing I can think of that gets so beyond the conversation would be the rape of children or the murder of children. Then you say, actually, I can't talk about this. This is, but, even if a woman is shagged by 20 blokes, people would still talk about it, wouldn't they? You never guess what happened last night. I've been to police drink-ups where a girl was given a bloke or two blokes blowjobs in the pub. I've been there and seen it. We don't say, I ain't talking about that. It's the biggest bit of gossip going. You dine on that for years afterwards. So and the only thing I can think of is these are people that compromise themselves. And would any of us enjoy being there? I certainly wouldn't.
No.
There's no way I would enjoy being caught up in any of that.
No.
What have they got? I want nothing. I don't want to have sex with children. I don't want to see children murdered. I don't want a demon to help me out through life and give me all the pleasure. I don't want that. There is nothing, but these people obviously do. There'll be some very, very broken people there, people that are absolutely traumatized, angry, just emotionally screwed. And that's it. And so, I mean, you've only got to look at Donald Trump, a ruthless businessman. Well, why would you be ruthless? Why would you pride yourself on being ruthless? Why would you want more than you could possibly ever spend? Why? It would only equate to the fact that you are influenced negatively and you are a broken person. Yeah. You'd want to be benevolent, surely, and nice.
One thing that is interesting that happened over here, obviously, they voted on releasing the Epstein files and things like that. But also there was a vote taken in, I can't remember if it was the House or the Senate, but basically should the House unveil their own sexual mishappenings or exploitations, and it was voted against something like 350.
Of course it would be.
So they don't, there's dirt everywhere. It's just.
Look, I applied for a job dealing with top secret information. So I had to be vetted to the deepest level of vetting. Vetting's in tears, right? So the easiest one is references. You've got to get a reference as a form of vetting, you know. And the next thing they then start looking into your financial affairs and things like that. But when you get intrusive vetting, you have to then declare your sexual partners. You have to declare your sexuality. You have to declare if you've ever been on dating websites. So people have vulnerability. So two main areas of vulnerability are their financial situation, because it will make someone inclined to steal or to lie and cheat. And they found that when someone applies for a job and they eventually get caught stealing, that their intention to steal takes place not years down the line, but it takes place at the initial interview. 90% of those that get caught stealing at work intend to get that job, to intend to benefit by appropriating dishonestly at the interview stage. So there's a lot of companies then that they use psychometric testing to weed them out at the interview stage. Are people doing this job so they can actually fleece us, right? And the other one is sexuality. So when you get jobs which involve top secret information, and you know, in no way am I being contentious in saying that, you will fail that vetting if you're homosexual, especially if you're a male homosexual, because of your likelihood to have multiple sexual partners, which makes you more liable to coercion and blackmail and things like that. And that was something that was said to me when I was going through my vetting, and that was said by a senior police officer, that homosexuals tend to fail intrusive vetting, and people that are involved in swinging and dating websites and things like that, because it's a weakness and they know it, and they are then susceptible right from the get-go to be manipulated or to go corrupt. So when we are seeing people like Mandelson, you know, the bloke has been involved in scandals with rent boys and financial skullduggery. And he's been known, and he's also been mentioned in the range list as being involved in ritualistic abuse. So at what point do you jump on that?
Can you point people in the right direction of where the range list could be found?
Google the range. It's an acronym: RAINS, Romeo Alpha India November Sierra. Just put range satanic lists.
Simple as that.
And it was authored by Dr. Joan Coleman. It's 16 pages of jaw-dropping information in which it names people past and present. It names household celebrities, politicians, and it actually tells you what they've done. So it will include details of child rape, child sacrifice, cannibalism, and it will even give their car registrations, their mobile phone numbers, their landline numbers, and their home addresses, and the venues it took place. You couldn't get a more all-inclusive evidential document. And what's the government done about it? Absolute bugger all. What have the police done about it? Equally as much. Nothing. Zero. You know, nothing. They're nada, nothing, niche. Nothing. And it makes the Epstein list look tame. It really does. The Epstein list has got nothing on the range list. Nothing.
John, did anything happen to Dr. Coleman for collating all our information?
They tried, but she died in the end. She, I think she got dementia in the end and just withered away. But I mean, the range list, it only went out because it was corroborated to a journalistic degree. So 2 or more people, every item, every name is independently corroborated by a minimum of 2 people. Totally independent, right? Otherwise, but there's an extended list, which is many, many pages more. I know people that have seen it, but you know, someone that was in the higher ranks when I was on the Vice unit, he was in charge of the obscene publications. He's named on it. This guy goes on to advise the BBC and Channel 4. He's even gives an interview on Netflix's Jimmy Savile 2-part documentary about how did this happen. He's named on the range list. I mean, the bare cheek of these people, it defies belief. I've reported him to the IPCC for being involved in it. What have they done? As far as I'm aware, nothing. But you know what, they think they're winning, but they'll find out when they take their last breath exactly who the winner is, and it certainly ain't them. I pity them. I do. I pity them.
John, it's been absolutely amazing speaking to you. Just let me ask you, are you still doing the cold water swimming?
Yeah. I sort of been away from it for a couple of weeks. I'm going back to it. Last year, even up to January, I swam every single week, every single month. The year I swam in open water in the United Kingdom. The lakes are so much colder than the sea. The sea tends to be cold, but it's a bit consistent. But the lakes, rivers and lakes, oh man, that takes a heart. But yeah, without a doubt, the best. It was unparalleled health benefits of cold water swimming, providing you don't take a mouthful of sewage. That is, you know.
Yeah.
Part of my health complications, I actually did think were from my virus, from virology, because of I was reckless where I swam.
Okay.
And I was swimming sort of downstream from sewage outlets, all sorts. I wouldn't do it again. I wouldn't do it, you know, be selective. But it's beautiful. It's brilliant. I love it. I love it. Good for depression. Very good for depression.
And anxiety. What have you got? Anything coming up? What's the next thing you've got coming up? Have you any?
Well, yeah, I've been doing national television. So I'm working on a documentary, for a crime documentary for Channel 4. I've got stuff coming out with BBC Radio. I'm not a fan of either of them, I must add. I'm not, you know, people go, oh, John Wedger, stuff like that. No, it's none of that. You know, look, any platform's a platform. I'm sort of comment on quite a bit in the national sort of news channels. LBC, I've been on GB News, Talk TV, and a few of them. But I can see that easing up now, because this war situation, the Middle East situation, is kicked off. When it comes up sporadically, people ask me if I want to talk on podcasts and things like that. Where I can, I will always oblige. Where I can, I was always oblige. So, you know, wait and see. I'm trying to link in with Mel Gibson at the moment. I think he's doing some amazing work. Hopefully, I'll be meeting up with him when he comes to the UK. You know, one of the few people in that industry that really is doing the right thing. But you know, you just sort of get through. I've got a book coming out, Jimmy. I've got a book. It's near to finishing. It's not far off it now. So hopefully that'll be out.
Awesome.
Well, it'll be finished before the summer. Actually, hopefully before Lent it'll be finished. But yeah, no. So I'm abstaining from alcohol and all that throughout Lent. I do fasting and things like that. Just because it's good for you, really. I mean, don't make you lose weight though. But I mean, it's good for you. But that's it, really. I don't know. I'm a bit like a submarine. You'll see me, and then I'll go under, and I won't communicate. And then I'll come up again, and then, you know, I'll sort of do that. So.
Well, as long as you keep coming back up, John, you know what I mean. That's what we want.
Yeah. I'm on the rise. I've been under the radar really for a month, but I'm back on the rise again. So.
Well, once again, thank you so much for joining us. Have you got a website or anything people can jump on?
There is the Freedom Community, John Wedger. Some guy does my website. Big up you, John, who does my website. I don't tend to. He puts the stuff on. I sporadically put stuff on Facebook and YouTube. I don't know. I've sort of fallen out of favour with social media at the moment. But it'll come back again. So there'll be more coming out on John Wedger YouTube, John Wedger Facebook, and then it'll go quiet again, and then I'll come out again and it'll go quiet.
I'll put some links. I'll put your links beneath this video. But
yeah, thanks so much. And good to see you back in the comedy, Jimmy.
Well, I try. I keep trying, but you know, in a world of walkery, it's difficult, but it's a hill I'll die on. You know,
it's the right wing comedians gone at the moment, but they'll come back. And we need comedy at the moment. We need it.
Yeah. We need the reincarnation of Bernard Manning.
Yeah, exactly. That old school working class.
Yeah.
Brilliant. I mean, that's all I do now to cheer myself up. I watch the old 80s. I like watching Minder, the old On the Buses and stuff like that. Going back to the 70s and the 80s, that old school when, you know, when men were men, and you know, and that was it, and that good old working class mentality. I absolutely love it. So,
and when you could say birds, you could say the word, you could say birds and things, and without offending people.
Yeah, of course, you know, And if you looked at Bernard Manning, he actually used to give sound advice to people. He used to give financial advice if people were in debt, but it would be veiled in his comedy. And when you listen to it, you think he's actually helping people with some, you know. I've seen. I was quite impressed when I saw that. But yeah, I'm not a fan of this new lefty. They can get stuffed. I'm not interested in that. But
yeah, I can't watch
just
it.
keep going. But you know what you see is I came on your show many years ago, and you know it's still coming on there. So there's a few of us that we're very consistent. We're still out there, still doing it. Yeah. People will come, people will go, but there'll be the old school lot that will be, they're all stalwarts that will just keep going and keep going. So hopefully I'll remain one of them.
John, God bless you. Keep up the good work, and hopefully you can pop on again sometime and tell us of your latest developments.
At any time. Thank you, Ian. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, it's been good.
It's been a pleasure. Any platform, I welcome it. And just
thank you, John.
God bless all victims and survivors, and speak out and shame the devil.
Thank you. And thank you, everybody, for watching. See you next week. Bye-bye.
See you. Bye.